Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, we have oft-times repeated here on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that this 2016 presidential election cycle has been the most heated and contentious of living memory. And that's due thanks in no small part to the oddball ascendancy of the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around Bulgarian, Donald J. Trump, also known as John Barron, also known as John Miller. But there's more to it than just this deterioration of the political narrative in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. There has been a deluge of problems, and part of it comes into the way that Donald Trump has insistently and incessantly pushed the political narrative of this election cycle ever further into the gutter, ever further into the filth, that it's turned into a proverbial mudslinging contest. However, one of the problems that both my first officer, Jeremy Graventon, and I have with the New York Bulgarian is that he's already come out to the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and said that he is not going to hit Hillary Clinton as hard as he hit his fellow Republicans, once again demonstrating that he is not exactly who he claims to be. Nevertheless, folks, this is something that we have warned about going on 10 months straight now, and for the most part, the Branch Trumpidians have done everything in their power to ignore our near-prophetic warnings. And it's to the point now of we almost are hesitant to give these warnings because they are going to ignore them. However, it would be remiss of us, because we would be derelict in our duty should we not continue to make these warnings, as Paul Revere made the warnings that the British regulars were approaching at the start of the American War of Independence. You see, we find ourselves in an untenable situation where ad hominem attacks have become the new norm of political discourse in our system of polity. Now, of course, that has no place in an open and honest society like the United States of America. Our founding fathers expected us to be a virtuous republic. They expected us to understand that our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, none other than the God of nature, were to be taken exceedingly seriously. That we were not to just willy-nilly hand over the reins of political power to a charlatan, to a huckster, to a con artist, or a carnival barker, the likes of which Donald Trump satisfies all of those characteristics. He represents the base problems of our nation, except that really what the problem is and what we're facing in this nation is a series of self-fulfilling distractions and problems that are rooted in our divorcement or departure from the fundamental tenets that are contained within the clear and concise language found within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And therefore, everywhere we turn right now, we see that moral decay is setting in with our nation. We see that American citizen has been pitted against American citizen through these nefarious attempts at orchestrating a tactic of divide and conquer. You see, the base of the Republican Party is hopelessly divided. Why? Because of the scorched earth policies, tactics, and strategy implemented by the so-called Trump train. And therefore, what they are doing is ensuring that Hillary Rotten Clinton will have an easy victory in this November general election. You see, this was our election cycle to lose. This was our election cycle to win, really, because of the failed policies that have truly harmed this country under the disastrous 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. Surely everything that he has done, whether it be attacking the institution of marriage or our traditions, has led to a constitutional crisis of epic proportions looming within this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And because of the failures of leadership from the gutless opposition party, or GOP, we find that these untenable situations continue to face us, and that there has been no real end in sight. And this is what has sparked the outrage and the fury that grips the hearts, souls, and minds of the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people. I understand this anger. We share this anger. We're upset that Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan, the current Speaker of the House, essentially handed over a cromnibus budget proposal to Obama, thereby funding everything that the Obama administration wanted to achieve in what was supposed to be his lame duck, basically his lame duck term. But now he is being able to really strike down on us. He's being able to double down on his twisted Fabian socialist agenda that is all about destroying this nation as we once knew it and loved it. And, of course, we see that this is continuing with Donald J. Trump, who went after the family members of his fellow Republicans, violating the so-called 10th commandment of Ronald Reagan, that thou shalt not attack thy fellow conservatives. But you see, that's the thing. Trump is no conservative. He even said that it's the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party. He said that while it would be nice to have party unity, it was certainly not a necessity. And you see, he also went out and said that it is the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party. I know that that just has been repeated, but it needs to be, because it shows that, as we have been warning for these past 10 months straight, he is not who he claims to be. That's why he plays around with these alter egos like John Barron and John Miller. It was all to deceive not only the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, but also the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this representative republic of ours, we the people. You see, how can we trust a man who is so insecure in his identity that he can't even embrace who he is, that he has to put out these flubbing alter egos? It means that his sudden overnight conversion to conservatism is not real. And remember, he even said that he is a conservative, but who cares? All we need right now is a strong leader. That is not the way that conservatism works. If we are going to solve the problems in this country, we are going to have to return to strict adherence to the natural law tenets that underpin our Constitution and to the Constitution itself. You see, all of the penultimate concerns that face this country, whether it be the economy, whether it be anything else, is because we have divorced ourselves and distanced ourselves from the clear and concise language of the United States Constitution. Folks, there really is no way to get around that. There's no way to sugarcoat that. There's no way to hide from that. That is the simple reality. It's just the facts, and we are facing them on a daily basis. And that's why it's so troubling to see that we have a presumptive nominee who doesn't even find value in the Constitution. In fact, he said that he's never really fully read it because he never found value in it. That's ridiculous. But all this is an ongoing ad hominem attack that has been a quintessential part of his candidacy ever since he first officially threw his hat in the ring last July. And even though Texas Senator Ted Cruz, the true constitutionalist, the man that would have allowed we the people to come forth and do our duties and obligations and responsibilities in saving this country, because only we are endowed with that authority to do so, was mercilessly attacked by the New York Bulgarian. He attacked not only Trump, but his family. Remember the ludicrous things that Roger Stone Jr., one of his acolytes, had said, and then his friend who runs the National Enquirer, David Pecker, did with respect to Ted Cruz allegedly having extramarital affairs when that was based on uncorroborated anonymous sources. And then again, based on some uncorroborated photograph, he said that Cruz's father, Rafael Cruz, had been involved with the JFK assassination because there's one singular picture that shows Cruz standing in a crowd next to Kennedy assassin Lee Harvey Oswald. Well, here's the thing. It's uncorroborated. It's unsubstantiated. It's tabloid nonsense. And yet the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have run with that as if it's the truth. Now, one might think that in this election cycle, that now that the Texas senator has officially suspended his candidacy for the highest office in the land, that a more unifying Trump would come out. After all, Paul Manafort had appeared before the détente wing of the gutless opposition party, or as it's colloquially known, the establishment wing of the Republican Party, or the so-called leadership of the party, and he stated in a meeting with them that the Trump that we see on stage, the thumping speeches, that's all just an illusion. That is all just a caricature or an alter ego. Maybe it's either John Barron or John Miller. We're not sure which it is, but he's saying that when it would reach the general election, that we would see a more presidential Trump. We would see the real Trump, that his true colors would start to appear, that the mask would finally start to come off. Well, that hasn't started yet. In fact, Trump made an appearance on the Fox News channel's The Kelly File for his first face-to-face interview with Fox News host Megyn Kelly since the time the row between them started last summer at the first nationally televised gutless opposition presidential candidate debate, when she asked that tough question of him. And it's interesting to see the dynamic that was there, because those two clearly do not like each other. Because he went on a smear campaign against her, and he went to social media, particularly Twitter, because that is his favorite avenue to sling these sorts of ad hominem attacks that have no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America, to double down on his rhetoric, to attack her credibility as well. And it's interesting because during this interview, she asked whether he thought there were any mistakes that were made during his primary season. And it started to focus on that atrocious picture that he put out of Heidi Cruz to make her appear ugly. And he said that she was fair game because she had been very proactive in the campaigning. Well, so had his wife. And we all remember the response that he had when the Czech thumper was attacked by that super PAC. Now, he blamed Ted Cruz for that and doubled down on a lie for that, when in fact federal election law prohibits the candidacies of having any type of direct influence or contact with these super PAC organizations. And we see that, again, there is this hypocritical notion with respect to Donald Trump, in so much as he goes out and thinks that the rules don't apply to him. In other words, he can go out and fling mud, but if anybody does it to him, then they should be destroyed. And it's a terrible thing, and politics is so god-awful. You see, it's this sort of selective false outrage that also reminds me of the tactics of Saul Alinsky that comes straight out of his book, The Rules for Radicals. And that is exactly what we're facing in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. But I don't want you to take my words for this at face value. I've actually got the soundbite of Trump appearing on the Kelly File discussing this, and I'm about to pull that up right now and let you hear for yourself, and then we will discuss it once that's played back. So here we go. I'm queuing it up now.
Made any mistakes in this campaign? You had said publicly you thought the retweet about Heidi Cruz was a mistake. Let me just...
Well, I said I could have done without it, to be exact. I mean, I could have done without it.
You said a mistake. Are you walking that back?
No, I'm not walking it back, but I actually didn't say it that way. I said I could have done without it. I mean,
but it was a mistake, wasn't it? I mean, that you shouldn't have done that,
I wish I didn't do it. Although, you know, I guess you could say she's fair game because she's very much involved with the campaign. But I don't know. She just seems like a nice woman. You know what? I have millions of followers at Real Donald Trump. I have millions of followers. I have millions of
I'm familiar.
Yes, you are. The thing that gets me in trouble is retweets. Mm-hmm. The retweet is really more of a killer than the tweets. The tweets I seem to do pretty well with.
So that's one, the Heidi Cruz thing. Let me just give you a list of a couple and tell me whether you have any.
So you see right there, it's instantly not his fault. Yeah, maybe he wished it hadn't occurred, but really, Heidi Cruz had brought this onto herself by being so involved in the election process or in the primary season, and therefore she really shouldn't have complained, and no, it's not a mistake, and maybe it's the fault of his followers on Twitter for retweeting stuff. Really? Really, you're not going to take responsibility for your own actions for the very things that you put out there? That's part of the problem that we have with the Fabian socialists. They're the ones that want to go out there and basically take away this notion that you have to be accountable for your own actions. Remember that Harry S. Truman had that placard on his desk that said the buck stops here. But under both Barack Hussein Obama and what is appearing to surface with Donald J. Trump, we see that it's always someone else's fault. It's never their own fault. They cannot be responsible for it. It has to be their workers or their followers or someone acted stupidly. It just is beyond the pale. It shows that these are narcissists who are acting like petulant children who think they have the key and answers to everything, and that those keys and answers are about operating outside of the Constitution. Because if you recall, Donald Trump stated on numerous repeated occasions throughout the primary process and season that he would use the executive order power, like Obama did, outside of the proper scope and application of the United States Constitution. In a sense, he would continue to transform the presidency into something that it was never constitutionally endowed to be. In a sense, it would become a second legislature. But you see, according to Article 1, Section 8 of our shared Constitution, only the United States Congress, including the House of Representatives and the Senate, are capable of drafting legislation. They are the legislative branch. That power is specifically enumerated to them. And when you think about the way that our federal government was designed to operate, the way that it would properly work, it has to be within the confines of the Constitution. In other words, the specific branch of government has to trace its authority back to a power that is specifically enumerated to it within the clear and concise language of the Constitution. And if you look at Article 2, which is the one that defines the presidency and the executive branch of government, you will find that it makes no mention whatsoever of these sorts of legislative powers. It's sort of the same thing that we see with respect to the judiciary. And I bring that up because so many who are calling for a tyranny of false unity keep pointing to the Supreme Court, saying that that is the end-all be-all, and that's why Trump would still be better than Hillary Clinton. The problem is the court has given itself, back in Marbury versus Madison, the power of judicial review, something that is not found within the Constitution. In other words, it has been, since 1803, acting outside the confines of the Constitution. We need to get back to the proper scope and application of government as it was intended and as it is mandated by the Constitution itself. Because pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, the United States Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. In other words, it's not mere suggestions. It's not just something that should be considered as a guidepost or a guideline. No, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It is what makes this nation what it is. It is what has allowed our nation and this once thriving and flourishing representative republic to reach such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history. But again, Donald Trump doesn't care about any of this. And his followers seem to not care about any of it as well. They revel in the fact that these sorts of ad hominem attacks have become the new norm of political discourse and political dialogue in the United States. They forget the fact that our founding fathers expected us to have a virtuous republic. And a virtuous republic means that we have to discuss the issues, that we have to be an issue-based society, and that civil discourse needs to be a part of it. Otherwise, the system can't work. But you see, that's part of the idea. One of the questions that has been lingering around the New York Bulgarian ever since he first officially threw his hat in the ring is whether he was actually serious about running for the presidency. After all, the former manager of his super PAC that's now defunct, Stephanie, said that he was never truly serious about running for president or winning it. It was just all an ego trip, a publicity stunt. You see, this is why we say here on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that Donald J. Trump is the P.T. Barnum of our era. He is wanting to basically drop or devolve the political narrative in this country into the gutter. He wants to drag us all down into it and turn it into a reality television program. Hell, even top staff and personnel members of the Trump campaign have come out and said that the presidency would be the ultimate reality television program. Folks, that is beyond belief. That is beyond the pale. It is wholly unacceptable. We are a representative republic. That's why we have said that you can't run the United States of America like a business. It's why you can't treat the political process or the electoral process as a reality TV program. People's fundamental and inalienable rights, their liberties, their privileges and immunities, all of it is under dire threat. And the consequences are so serious that we need the process to be taken seriously. But Trump has turned it into a circus sideshow freak attraction. He has essentially gone down the lines of P.T. Barnum saying that a sucker is born every minute. That is the absolute last thing that this nation needs right now, particularly when you consider that the United States of America is in the midst of not only an identity crisis, but also a constitutional crisis. When you keep those things in mind and remember exactly what it is that we are facing in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, it becomes all the more clear why we simply cannot allow someone like that to be the nominee for the gutless opposition party. Yet our warnings went unheeded by the Branch Trumpidians. They thought they knew best. They told us that we didn't know what we were talking about, or they'd go into their vulgarian language and claim that we were just Cruz leg humpers. No, folks, what really matters here, and what we have stated on past episodes, is we are about the principles, the values, and the honor and the supreme law of the land. We are about returning to the Constitution. Therefore, the candidate doesn't matter. Whoever would go forth and project a message of returning this representative republic to strict adherence to the fundamental tenets contained within the four corners of the Constitution would be who we support. And anyone who betrays that, even if it was Ted Cruz, we would turn against, because it is important to recall that our fundamental and inalienable rights and our representative republic and each of the various independent elected offices contained within it are greater than we as individuals. Yet, we are also cognizant of the fact that the United States of America is not a democracy, but a representative republic. Because a democracy only recognizes the right of the majority. It allows there to be two sorts of things, a tyranny of the majority and a tyranny of the minority. Whereas a representative republic defends the fundamental and inalienable rights of the popular sovereign, or the individual American citizen. When you look at the opening lines to the preamble to the United States Constitution, you see that it starts with "we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, do ordain and establish." You see, folks, that clearly states that we are the only ones that can save this nation. And so many have been looking for some sort of a messianic figure to save the country. No. Because if you give enough political power to someone who claims to have the power to save this country all by him or herself, you are giving power to someone who also has the power to destroy the country. That is why our founding fathers expected we, the people, the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, to take our duties, obligations, and above all responsibilities quite seriously. They expected us to be proactively involved in the political process. They expected us to do our part to ensure that totalitarians, despots, and any sort of untenable candidate would never be allowed to go towards the White House. And not just the White House, but any office in government. We are the watchmen. We are the ones that are the self-appointed guardians of our shared Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable rights as well. Yet so many in America, thanks to the revisionist historians and thanks to the Fabian socialists who have infiltrated not only our institutions of education, but also our information media sources and outlets, have changed the narrative. They're slowly erasing the knowledge of exactly what our government is. They're trying to rewrite the history of the United States to make it appear as though we are some sort of a terrible sort of person. or nation, that we don't care about the things that matter, and that the only thing that matters is a false sense of equality. But that is not the way that our founding fathers intended for this nation to operate. And it once again shows that we have ceded far too much of our power and authority to an out-of-control federal government. But Donald J. Trump just continues to attack the true constitutionalist who was involved in this race, and he refuses to relent on that. He refuses to be a principled leader. And that's because Donald J. Trump is a charlatan and a narcissist. Donald J. Trump, in what has almost been 70 years, I'm not sure if he's 70 years old yet or not, but he's fast approaching it, has only cared about himself. He's never once cared about anyone else. And he has no idea what the notion of being a public servant is, because he's only ever had servants. He's never been a servant. He thinks he's above the law. That's where he and Hillary Clinton are very similar. They share that characteristic. And that's part of the reason why both my first officer, Jeremy Grapenden, and our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, as well as yours truly, can't accept Trump. Do not find Trump to be an honorable candidate or an acceptable candidate for the highest office in the land, particularly when you consider that this Barack Hussein Obama regime, through their outlandish, illicit, rogue, and tyrannical use of the executive order power, has transformed the executive office, the chief executive, into a position that it was never constitutionally meant to be. We need someone to rein in the power of this out-of-control federal government, to restore balance and to return to the proper tenets of federalism. But Donald J. Trump, like any type of Fabian socialist who has held progressive views for the vast majority of his adult life, doesn't know about creation. He knows about destruction. Well, he knows a little bit about creation, but for himself, not for a greater nation, not for a greater good. And you see, folks, that is the true sense that we have lost in the United States. We have lost any connection with this idea that there is a greater good, that there is a virtuous popular sovereignty that exists between all of us by right of birth or by right of naturalization. We have forgotten this due to the concerted and incremental efforts of the Fabian socialists, who are hell-bent on the absolute annihilation of not only the United States of America, but also her people. They want to replace us. They want to turn us into serfs, and they want to create a new age form of feudalism. Remember that Alexander de Tocqueville said that socialism of any flavor is basically just new age socialism, or new age feudalism. Why? Because the leading party, or the leading autocrats that are the vanguard of this socialist movement, want to micromanage the facets and the daily facets of everyone's lives, to essentially control everything and micromanage everything from birth until death. That is just like feudalism. It essentially turns the people into serfs and makes them wholly beholden to the government. And that the government knows best, and that the government has all of the solutions. Yet when you stop and think about it, and look at the way that our nation was formed, and you look at the Federalist and Anti-Federalist Papers, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, all of our foundational documents point to we the people being the catalyst behind this revolutionary movement. In fact, what was so revolutionary about the establishment of the United States of America was this fact that the people, the citizens, were considered the ultimate wielders of sovereignty. Before that point in time, it had always been concentrated either in king and parliament, as in England, or in the more absolutist states like the Kingdom of France, in the king himself. We wanted to depart from that because we thought that was corrupt. It's as Thomas Paine said, monarchy is the most wicked and evil form of government ever devised by the hands of men. And therefore, a representative republic based on natural law tenets, which are by their very nature timeless, is the way to go. That was revolutionary because it was giving the power to the people. And therefore, it was expected that we would have a virtuous republic, that we could have a political discourse without engaging in senseless ad hominem attacks. Yet you see that with the bizarre ascendancy of the New York Bulgarian, that we have abandoned that we have gone to another approach, an approach that is wholly out of line with everything that this nation was about since its inception. That is something we cannot tolerate because it threatens the sanctity of the United States of America. We just can't allow these attacks to continue. All right, ladies and gentlemen, keeping in line with this attack sort of narrative that is on today's Solo Flight Specials topic, very shocking to see that once again there's been a strain of anti-Semitism that is connected with the Trump camp, and once again the Trump campaign has done little to nothing to condemn it. In fact, Donald J. Trump refused to condemn this most recent outbreak of anti-Semitism that occurred with respect to a GQ reporter named Julia Ehoff, who wrote an article that wasn't particularly flattering of the Trump train, and as a direct result of that, she was lambasted by some of the Trump acolytes and followers. And this included having photoshopped images of her in a concentration camp uniform sent to her, receiving death threats on the telephone, and also receiving pre-recorded calls with Hitler's speeches being played in it. You know, folks, this is ghastly. This is the sort of thuggery that is not allowed in an open and honest republic like this. Sure, there is the First Amendment. However, what is happening here would not be protected speech. And anyway, this is not a government official that they are trying to attack. In fact, what they are engaging in is known as terroristic threat in criminal law. This is shocking in every sense because it goes to show that the most vile, base things of humanity are coming to fruition in the Trump camp. And what's fascinating about this, too, is that Trump said that Heidi Cruz was open to attack for being heavily involved in the campaign. Well, this article was about Melania Trump, the Czech thumper, and she, like her husband, said that she would not hold her fans accountable and that she wouldn't condemn their vile behavior. You see, folks, this is part of a never-ending pattern that we have seen with respect to the Trump candidacy ever since he first officially threw his hat in the ring, whether it was receiving support from former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke, or whether receiving the endorsement of the current Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, or having a notorious white supremacist radio show host as a guest of honor at Trump events during the primary season. This is all a part of an unacceptable type of campaign rhetoric. It should have no place in the American system of polity, yet here we are. We find ourselves under this system of attack, under this sort of nonsense that is deleterious to the entire American system of polity. And I find it wholly unacceptable, just as I am sure the vast majority of our cherished listening passengers and audience members also find this sort of activity as wholly unacceptable. And we see that this comes out of an article on the Haaretz, which was originally published in Jewish Insider by Jacob Kumbla. And Kumbla said that Melania Trump was really out of line because she went out there and said that essentially this reporter, this Ehoff reporter, had brought these attacks onto herself. Since when has anyone exercising their First Amendment right opened up death threats, open up these vile terroristic threats to occur? That goes beyond the pale. That is basically within the confines of the fighting words doctrine that we have mentioned on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Folks, We cannot tolerate this because it goes to a greater problem. It goes to this sort of nastiness that will play directly into the radical fringe elements of the Fabian socialist left's two-dimensional caricatures and stereotypes of the right. In other words, as we have been warning for these past 10 months straight, we see that Donald Trump and his candidacy is fulfilling and satisfying all of those untenable situations and all of those unsavory characteristics. And believe me, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media will use this to their utmost advantage. This is what they've been waiting for. This is what they've been hoping for. It is going to play out like some horrific debacle, and we will have no one to blame for this but ourselves. Because make no mistake about it, they will attempt to connect this to all conservatives who attempt to support Donald Trump, putting their vote behind him in this erroneous notion of voting for the lesser of two evils. Folks, we have got to get past this. We have got to reject this. And the fact that the presumptive nominee of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, simply refuses to go out and condemn these statements just shows that he is tacitly inciting violence. Everything that played out in the primary season, whether it was the incitement of violence, saying that he would want his followers to punch protesters in the face, or in the good old days, these protesters would have been carried out on stretchers, that is unacceptable because it shows that he's inciting violence and fulfilling all of these negative stereotypes. But again, our warnings have gone unheeded by the Branch Trumpidians. They will come up with another "yeah, but Trump" excuse to try and really clamp down on this, and that too is unacceptable. We have to be very, very cautious in how we proceed from here as we approach the general election cycle. And going down this line of attacks again, we see that Trump's buddy, Roger Stone, is saying that Trump should pull CNN's FCC license once he becomes president. Now, granted, I'm not thoroughly impressed with CNN. I know that they are a dyed-in-the-wool member of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. Nevertheless, this is just another example of how Trump and his followers are pushing to infringe upon the First Amendment rights of not only the free press, but also of the people. Because as you recall, what I've said not only in the previous segment of today's program, but in previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, The Wright Flyer, Trump has also wanted to roll back the public figure exception to America's libel laws. Why? To chill free speech. This is all about working to advance Trump, to work in Trump's favor, irrespective of the detrimental impact and harm that that might have to the body politic of the United States of America. Once again, folks, it shows that he is not committed to the fundamental tenets that are found in the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the United States Constitution. And again, it reiterates the point of why it's so dangerous to have a nominee who has gone on the record as stating that he never really fully read the United States Constitution because he never found any value in it. How can that person be qualified to be a candidate for the highest office in the land when he shows a blatant disregard for it, and he would be taking an oath of office to uphold and defend that document against all enemies, foreign and domestic? You see, this is the outrageous thing that has developed in this political cycle. We see people being attacked for upholding and fulfilling their oath of office of defending the Constitution. It is beyond the pale. It shows just how far we have fallen as a once thriving and flourishing representative republic. once again demonstrating that Trump is only in this for himself. He has actually come out and stated that if he doesn't win the White House, he said this to Megyn Kelly on that same infamous interview that occurred last night, that it would all be a colossal waste of time and money. Well, I thought that the whole thing was that if you were going to run for president of the United States, the highest office in the land, that you would be doing it in the hopes of serving the American people, of becoming a public servant. That is what the entire process is about. But you see, again, it's not about that with Trump. It's just about the money. It's just about the greed. That is all he has ever cared about. And we have to be very cognizant of that fact, because it works against us time and again. And if we're not careful, it will come back to haunt us. And I think that we have to be exceedingly careful here, because there is so much that has been happening that works against us, that works in a deleterious fashion, and will play directly into the hands of the left. Remember, this is why we said it was so dangerous when he claimed that he didn't want or need the GOP to be unified, that he essentially didn't want conservatives' votes because he'd be able to bring in disenfranchised Bernie Sanders voters. That's simply not going to happen, because he is the personification of everything that they loathe and despise. Remember that the entire impetus behind the Sanders campaign and the driving force of the Sanderistas was all about sticking it to the 1%. Well, Donald Trump is clearly in their definition of the 1%. He is a billionaire, and he is all about money, and he is all about himself. So he satisfies everything that they loathe and despise about the political system, and we have to be exceedingly careful here, because it could cost us our majorities in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. But this is all due, thanks in no small part, to the vulgarian style of delivery and discourse that Donald has redefined this race with. He has disenfranchised and alienated true conservatives. In fact, there is a recent poll that has just come out that says that the majority of the voters are never Trump or Hillary, meaning that they don't support either of these two. And it was in The Hill. And it said that the majority of voters want to see an independent run against Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in the general election. And this came out of a special poll that was done by, let's see, data targeting. And it says that 55% of voters and 91% of voters under the age of 29 favor having an independent in the race, according to that data targeting poll. 65% have said they are willing to support a candidate who isn't either Clinton or Trump. Folks, that is staggering. That, once again, goes to show that what we have here are two of the most unpopular candidates to ever vie for the highest office in the land, that no one really likes them, that they represent a major problem. And so when we go to the general election, it's going to become a battle of who is disliked the least. Well, Donald Trump has gone out of his way to be a vulgarian. His followers scare a lot of people because of the things like that Melania Trump article, where they basically engage in these death threats. They have been engaging in death threats all throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle. Think back to the ways that they had sent death threats to the head of the Colorado GOP, the way that they had sent death threats to delegates who were not in favor of Donald Trump, and the way that they have even come out and attacked people on social media with death threats. Now, it can be argued that this is but a small minority of his base, but the fact that he is unwilling to go out and condemn it is really a major problem. It is a problem that will have to be overcome, and it will not be easy to overcome, because what it does is it gives ammunition to the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media to keep hitting at the conservative movement. Like Herbert Hoover, Trump will be blamed for conservatism, even though he was never truly conservative. Right now, he even says that it's the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party. Well, again, that plays into the radical and twisted agenda of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. Remember, their goal is to advance Fabianism at any cost, and the Fabian socialists are all about tearing down the system that currently exists to replace it with some sort of socialist dystopia. Again, we really can ill afford that right now, and that is why it is such a disaster to have Donald J. Trump as the presumptive nominee for the gutless opposition party. The media will try and say that all of this outlandish thing applies to all conservatives, because even Trump has gone out and at least tacitly claimed that he is a conservative, even though nothing could be further from the truth. Again, folks, these are the dangers that we have been warning about for 10 months straight, that it goes against everything that we hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And to ignore that is to ignore the great weight of the evidence that is compiling all around us. Yet that is exactly what the Branch Trumpidians want to engage in. They always like to claim, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. But the evil is there. It's clear, open, and obvious, and the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are clearly going to run with this, folks. They see this as a goldmine to finally tear apart the conservative movement, at least for 10 decades. You see, that was almost how long it was with Herbert Hoover. They see this as an opportunity to repeat that. We cannot afford to allow that to happen. That is why we here remain staunchly in the camp of never Trump, because he is unacceptable. We do not see him as a so-called lesser of two evils. Evil is evil, folks. It is venomous. It is destructive. It would be the death knell to this once thriving representative republic if the conservative movement is irreparably harmed by this vulgarian who only cares about himself, who has only ever cared about himself. And again, that is so dangerous, so very, very dangerous. But again, we see that the lies continue, that it's all working against us, and it raises that nagging question again of whether this was Trump's goal from the very beginning, whether what he has always wanted to do was to hopelessly divide not only the Republican Party, but the conservative movement, to be the Pied Piper of disillusioned conservatives, to ensure that his once good buddy, the once senator from the state of New York, to whom he was the top donor, would have an easy path to victory to the White House. How else could we explain the fact that he fired all of his staff and personnel in the various caucus and primary states that he won? That means he will really be entering this general election cycle at a severe disadvantage. And that would also be a severe disadvantage to we, the people, because it means that we would be losing and it would be blamed on a conservative outsider, even though Trump was never the sort. You see, it ties back into the topic that I covered in one of my previous Solo Flight special editions, in which I said that false perceptions and narratives are oftentimes more powerful in politics and have more influence and impact than reality itself. This is what I was speaking to. This is the goal that he has tacitly been working towards, that he has been trying to dupe the conservative movement into thinking that he is something which he is not. He does not have a long history of supporting the conservative movement, and that, too, makes him exceedingly dangerous. It is intellectually disingenuous to claim that Trump is a conservative, because if you recall, when he went on to that CNN town hall meeting, he said that the three important, in fact, vital functions of the federal government is to provide housing, health care, and education. Yet now we see that he comes out and flip-flops on that. Speaking out of both sides of his mouth, he now says he would do away with the Department of Education. Now, that's going to be funny for Dr. Ben I'm a Victim Carson, who sort of gave out this perspective that he had been bought off for his endorsement for the Quaff Waffle by being perhaps offered a position in his administration involving education. Now, how is that going to be possible with this? It's all hypocrisy. It shows that people have sold their souls out and have approved of this sort of attack mechanism that Donald Trump has unleashed upon this once thriving representative republic of ours. And it doubles down on the fact that this is what we have been warning about, that he would be unacceptable, that he would become worse and worse as the months move on. And we are still very far away from the actual general election cycle, which is slated for November. But we see that it continues. Think about the lie that he had about self-funding. Remember that Trump attacked Texas Senator Ted Cruz for his wife's involvement, or employment rather, with Goldman Sachs. Yet he then takes on Goldman Sachs partners to be his finance chair, and this very same individual has ties and connections with the liberal financier, or the left-wing Fabian socialist financier of George Soros. You see, folks, you can't make this stuff up. This is what's out there. There are so many skeletons in the Donaldoff's closet that we might as well call it a frickin' cemetery. And it will come out to bite us each and every time, because the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media not only selected him to be the presumptive nominee of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, but they will now turn against him to play out the narrative to advance the Fabian socialist cause. Now, if this was a backwater deal between Trump and Clinton, it shows that he has pulled off the greatest con game in the history of the Republican Party. And it will come to haunt us, surely, for years to come, unless we can do what Ted Cruz has called upon us to do, to stand and fight for liberty, to never give up on our cherished principles, to ensure that conservatism has a breath of fresh air and is revitalized by this, so that we ascend from the ashes like a phoenix and reclaim our rightful position. Because what is happening now is a truly attempted hostile takeover of the conservative movement. It's attempting to redefine the Republican Party as a progressive left-wing party once again. Remember that progressivism actually started under the Republican Teddy Roosevelt, and that he really pushed to get that movement started. Of course, it was the Democrat Woodrow Wilson that really carried it to fruition, but we see that it really did tear this country apart. It really pushed us in a bad way, and it took a true constitutionalist in Calvin Coolidge to finally turn this country around. What's so shocking here is that we rejected the Calvin Coolidge of our era, Texas Senator Ted Cruz. And I've even heard some of the Trump supporters say, look, conservatism has failed, so we need to go to populism. But populism has failed every time that it has been tried in American history. Look back to 1896, when William Jennings Bryan tried to implement a populist message. Yes, he won the nomination of the Democrat Party in that election and soundly lost to William McKinley. You see, folks, that was the failings of populism. Populism is nothing but a thin-veiled disguise for progressivism, just as the populist pragmatist movements were that arose in the wake of the collapse of William Jennings Bryan. None of these philosophies or ideologies line up with the tenets contained within our United States Constitution. And all of the populists in the past resorted to, though to a much lesser extent than the New York vulgarian himself, to these sorts of ad hominem attacks. They don't play by a sense of decorum. They don't believe in advancing a truly statesman-like quality. It's all about destroying. And that's why Trump's campaign has been referred to as the wrecking ball. But folks, we don't need a wrecking ball. We need to renovate. We need to restore the federal government, and indeed all levels of government in this federalist republic, back to the adherence to the Constitution. Without that, we are going to continue to see this nation on an accelerated death spiral. We're going to continue to see the power of the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people, be illicitly stripped from them and stolen by these feckless weasels, and we will see this country become something that it was never intended to be. And if we're not careful, it will take even more drastic measures to bring this country back from the brink of ruin. Of course, folks, this is what we have been warning about for 10 months straight now on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. But the Branch Trumpidians don't care. And you're certainly not going to hear this analysis from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, because they too ultimately do not care. It all comes down to that Fabian socialist agenda, that Fabian socialist narrative that they want to push. And it's all about divide and conquer. You see, Trump is about divide and conquer. That's why he said that populism really is his deal. And as Levin has said, populism really is progressivism by a different name. And the history of this nation and of American polity proves it. It proves that he is not really about conservative values. Remember, he came out and said that he loved the individual mandate of Obamacare. And he said that the government needs to provide health care to the people. But if you look at the Constitution, there is no claim of that. Sure, some try to misinterpret the General Welfare Clause as providing that the government needs to provide that, but no, that's really not what the General Welfare is about. The General Welfare Clause is just about saying what the government needs to run, the bare necessities of government, funding it and ensuring that it exists to ensure that the people can exercise their fundamental and inalienable rights. That does not include government-run health care. That does not include federally provided housing. That does not provide for federally induced education, which is really nothing short of indoctrination. And so you see that Trump is walking the same line as the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists who are hell-bent on destroying this representative republic of ours. We are truly in the midst of an identity crisis coupled with a constitutional crisis in America. Yet the Trumpidians say that the Constitution is somewhat quaint, antiquated document, that we need a charlatan to undo the work of a charlatan. Does that really make any sense? Do two wrongs make a right? I always thought that the old adage went that two wrongs don't make a right. And that's exactly what reality and common sense would tell us. But again, we see that mass lunacy has gripped the hearts and minds, as well as the souls, of the Branch Trumpidians. And of course, the salivating mainstream media would want to push Trump because they understand tacitly that he is the weakest candidate to pit against Hillary Rotten Clinton because of his infidelity, because of the way that he mistreats women, because of the support that he has received from those that would make those kinds of attacks that would be death threats towards Jews. All of that plays into this twisted narrative that the salivating mainstream media has wanted to perpetuate for generations. Well, he is like a dream come true for the frothing at the mouth leftists. He is fulfilling all of their stereotypes, all of their caricatures that they use to besmirch, belittle, and besmear the conservative movement. But the fact of the matter is, Trump is no conservative. But that's not how the narrative will be spun, because again, that would go against the propagandistic agenda and goal that they have. What they are for is fronting this hostile takeover of the Republican Party, and in a sense to demoralize and to discourage conservatives when this was really the election cycle where we were about to coalesce together and to bring this country back from the brink of ruin. Instead, we find ourselves with a wholly unacceptable, untenable candidate who talks out of both sides of his mouth, who is very dangerous on foreign policy issues, and who would continue to move towards Fabian socialism should he get the office. But I don't think that he really wants the office. I think he wants his good buddy and the person that he was the biggest donor for when she was senator, Hillary Clinton, to sit in the White House. I think that has been the goal of his attacks. In fact, I think that's also why he has said that he's not going to attack Hillary Clinton with the same sort of zeal and ferocity with which he attacked Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Again, folks, this sort of ad hominem attack that continues to be unleashed by the Trump camp really has no place here, and it will be utilized against us. And we need to be prepared for that inevitable outcome. Well, folks, it gets even more bizarre with these continued ad hominem attacks by Donald J. Trump. He now, once again, tries to play the faulty memory game, saying that he doesn't recall calling Megyn Kelly a bimbo on Twitter after his relentless assault against her after she had pressed him with a difficult question during the course of that first nationally televised gutless opposition party debate. It really is sickening, and it really demonstrates that he fulfills all of these nasty negative stereotypes that we have been warning about for the past 10 months. But that's just par for the course with Donald J. Trump. And remember that the Trumpidians have repeated ad nauseum that it doesn't matter what he said in the past. The only thing that matters is that people change. And they try and point to that ridiculous claim that Ronald Reagan had started out as a Democrat too. Except that in the case of Reagan, there had been at least 20 plus years of conservative principles and policies under his belt before he sought the highest office in the land. That is simply not the case with Donald Trump. So you see, they are playing this disingenuous game. They are attempting to pull the political wool over our eyes, and then they engage in this type of bullying where they attempt to pigeonhole us and berate us into a tyranny of false unity. Well, I'm not going to accept it. Just as they use the GOP in the state of Nebraska to attempt to go after the principled Senator Ben Sasse, who is continuing to stand on his never-Trump positions and policies, we too here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, will stand by our principled stance in favor of our shared United States Constitution. As we have stated in the previous segment and indeed on previous episodes, there is nothing here that shows that Donald J. Trump supports the Constitution. Why else would he push to have First Amendment rights belittled? Why else would he refuse to take to task those supporters and adherents that engage in this type of anti-Semitism, that type of hatred, and that type of vitriol that has become the new norm with respect to political discourse here in the United States? This is the sort of madness that would tear this country apart. And despite the rise of Donald J. Trump, do not think that the conservative movement is dead. Do not think that we are not galvanized by his ascendancy to see a rebirth of the conservative movement, to see it rise like a phoenix from the ashes, because that is exactly what is happening. We are building up for that, and that is what Ted Cruz said to do after he officially suspended his candidacy for the White House. It is going to take our continued effort, our continued attention. And if we don't give it that sort of attention, then we are just handing it over to them. But conservatives, you are right to be angry right now. You are right to feel as though the gutless opposition party or GOP has betrayed you. Look at the way the so-called self-funding Donald J. Trump has now gone into a meeting and agreement with RNC Chairman Reince Priebus for a funding agreement. Why would he not continue the self-funding through to the general campaign. I thought that that was a central pillar of what he was basically running off of throughout the primary process. Well, just like everything else, he has no principled positions. He's just a liar. He is a charlatan. He is a huckster. He is a snake oil salesman. Well, folks, that is not going to do us any favors in this upcoming general election process. It's not going to help us. It's not going to benefit us. It is going to work to our great detriment. This is why we have been attempting to warn you about this for the past 10 months straight. And as long as there is breath in my lungs, I will continue to speak to you as I speak into this microphone right here and right now. This nation and our fundamental and inalienable rights are far too important to hand over to the P.T. Barnum of our era. We cannot gamble with our liberties because they are non-negotiable. We know that Trump says everything is up for negotiation, but that is not the way that our representative republic is designed. That is not the way that true principled constitutional conservatives would operate. You see, he doesn't seem to think that conservatism as an ideology or as a philosophy has the solutions for this nation. But he's wrong. Because conservatism is defined as conserving that which exists. Or, in the case of the United States, conserving, preserving, promoting, and advocating for the supreme law of the land, which is none other than our United States Constitution, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what is also known as the Supremacy Clause. And again, folks, this all ties back into a truly ideological approach to government. That is what conservatism is all about. It is designed to put the Constitution at the epicenter, because the Constitution is the linchpin. It is the cornerstone of this entire representative republic of ours. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that. He just continues to waffle. That is why we name him now the Quaff Waffle. He's a hairy waffle that has a campaign built not on a house of cards, but on a Waffle House, because he is consistently inconsistent. But a man of principle, a man of character would be consistent. They would take easy stances, such as protecting the traditional identities for restrooms, not forcing private businesses to acquiesce to the homosexual mafia agenda that is being foisted upon the decent, hardworking, red-blooded American citizens. But Trump doesn't do that. Trump is once again returning to his New York values. But as we have said on past episodes, you need to represent all Americans if you are seeking to wield the reins of political power in this republic. But Trump doesn't do that. Trump is incapable of doing that. Trump is who Trump has always been. And the mask is starting to come off. And lie after lie and leftist position after leftist position will continue to appear, will continue to be paraded in front of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and still, the branch Trumpidians will come back with either "Yeah, but Trump" or "You're just a liar." It's fascinating to see how they have made themselves willfully blind to the truth, how they have done everything to say that anyone but Trump is wrong. But Trump is the common denominator here, folks. Trump is the singular thread that continues to be the holistic part of this entire candidacy. He is the one that continues to double down on these failed policies of the left. In fact, he is going to run to the left of Hillary on a great many issues in the general election. Why? Because he's already said that he doesn't need the gutless opposition party or GOP to be unified, because he'll be able to bring in disenfranchised Bernie Sanders supporters. Well, the only way that he's going to be able to do that is to run to the left of Hillary, and it's not going to work because, as I stated in the previous segments, he is the personification of what the Sanderistas loathe and despise the most. The billionaire who cheats workers. In his case, he really did cheat workers out of their paycheck. Look at what he did to the Polish Brigade. And when he came out and said, essentially, that everything that has come out of his mouth during this campaign season is just a mere suggestion, that's a cop-out, folks. That gives him the plausible deniability to attempt to change his positions on everything, to walk back everything. And that is clearly in line with the sorts of statements that he put out in his book, The Art of the Squeal, when he said that he would take the most hardline position and then whittle his way back to his true intentions in any form of negotiation. But you see, folks, again, that is not the way that a representative republic like the United States of America is supposed to work or operate. That goes against all of the fundamental tenets that are a quintessential part of the American character and fiber. But again, Trump doesn't care. Trump is in this about himself. Recall that I mentioned in the previous segment that he said that if he doesn't win, then this would all be a colossal waste of time and money. Why is that the only thing that he cares about? Why is it not about, if I don't win, it's bad for the American people? You see, there's the disconnect. There's where he's failing. There is where he is not keeping our best interests at heart. But this is what we have been warning about for 10 months straight now, folks. It's that Donnie does not give a damn about the disillusioned conservatives for whom he has been the Pied Piper. And remember that with this narrative of the Pied Piper, in the original story, when the price was too high for the town to pay, the Pied Piper walked off with their future to kill it, to destroy it. Well, that's what Donnie is trying to do with the conservative movement, because he is a Fabian socialist in an ill-fitting conservative suit. And this is why Steve King has come out and said that he's not ready to endorse Donald J. Trump, because he said, I don't know what his stance is with the Constitution. He literally has no stance with the Constitution. And that's quite true. Steve King is right. Trump has stated on more than one occasion that he has never fully read the Constitution because he doesn't find any value in it. Again, folks, the Constitution is the thing that is supposed to limit the president. It's the only thing that the president is supposed to draw his power from. It's the only thing that any of the three branches of the federal government is supposed to draw their power from. The problem is we have divorced ourselves from it. We have distanced ourselves from it for so long that we don't even recognize what the proper scope and application of government is anymore. The reason that this race has taken on the candor that it has taken on this feeling of great tension that it has, is because the presidency has far more power than it was ever constitutionally intended to have. And this is why we have said that, again, it comes down to the principles, not to the man who's running for office, or not to the person who's running for office, because the principles are greater than the individuals. You see, there is no such thing as perfection in this earthly plane. But the preamble to the United States Constitution said that we, the people, the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, came together to create that government for a more perfect union, to continue to strive for that which is unachievable, to have a laudable and noble goal. What's happened to sacred honor? You remember we mentioned in yesterday's program that sacred honor was the quintessential aspect that the Founding Fathers valued most. It's what they cared about the most. It's what they put more risk and emphasis into than any of the other things that they put up to risk, including their own lives, including their freedom, including their wealth, including everything about them. It was their sacred honor that mattered most. Well, that's on the flip side now. We now see that people are saying, no, it's the economy that matters more than social issues. Remember that the economy is a penultimate concern. If we lose the Constitution, we lose everything. It's that simple, because the Constitution defines who we are, both as a nation and as a people. It defines and mandates the proper scope and application and role of the federal government. It limits the wannabe potentates, despots, tyrants, and dictators from coming in and illicitly depriving us of our fundamental and inalienable rights. But I've seen far too many people say all throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle that the Constitution is no longer valid, that it hasn't protected us. Well, the reason it hasn't protected us is we have not been protecting it. You see, there is that symbiotic relationship that exists between the popular sovereigns and the Constitution, because it is a contractual document. It is the greatest contract ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. That is why it has been the longest contiguous running constitution in all of world history. But it means that we have to be dedicated to it. It means that we have to defend it, and that means standing up against Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. To say that the lesser of two evils is the only way to go about this is to abandon those principles. That is to turn your back on the very thing that defines us, the very thing that protects us, the very thing that has been the key since the inception of this nation over 230 years ago. You see how dangerous and precarious of a position we are in now, with Donald J. Trump being the presumptive nominee for the gutless opposition party. It means that we are continuing this unacceptable, untenable, and unsustainable slide to the left. And if the Branch Trumpidians thought that their movement was based on anger, wait until they see the real righteous indignation that is being unleashed now, because they forced this untenable, unacceptable, and above all, unelectable candidate down our throats. It will be to their great detriment. It will be to their undoing, because they did not consider the greater good. You see, folks, this is why we have to continue to advocate for civil discourse, why we have got to advocate to a return to sanity within not only the government, but also within popular culture, and also within our institutions of education, and most importantly, within our institutions of information media outlets. The Fabian socialists have been working tirelessly and incessantly for the past century and a half to deprive us of these things. They have a goal. They were never expecting instant gratification. We, on the other hand, think that stopgap measures will promote instant gratification, instantaneous results. We're not going to have that. You can't undo the amount of damage that has already been done to our once thriving and flourishing representative republic in the snap of a finger. It is literally going to require that we work for a long-haul plan. That means we make the Constitution the most important thing, and we move from grassroots organizations on up in redefining everything. It means that we spearhead a movement to take over the systems of education in this country. It means that we work to replace the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media with true, open, honest, independent sites. It means that those who were allegedly conservative pundits, people like Laura Ingraham, people like Little Orphan Annie Yep Yep Toto, and people like Matt Drudge, Michael Savage, and even to a lesser extent Rush Limbaugh, need to be held accountable for turning their backs on the conservative movement. It means that their word can never be trusted again, because they tacitly or overtly, in the cases of many of them, allowed this to come to fruition. They pushed for this. They moved for the destruction of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic. And they did it because they thought it might give them ratings, or that it might bring about wealth for them. Folks, this is about more than that. This is about the continued vitality and viability of our country. We have to go back to strict adherence to the Constitution, and we have to demand it at any and all levels. And if anyone takes a step away from that, we need to discard with them. Because if you leave them in place, and if you reward them, it means that they will continue to fester, that they will continue to move against our best interests as they have in this election cycle. If there is one thing that we can say that has been a blessing about the Trump candidacy, it's that it has exposed the frauds, the charlatans, those who went out of their way to move on to some popularity contest, as if that would be in the best interests of this nation. They disregard that self-accountability, self-respect, self-determination, these are all quintessential American values. No, they sold out. They sold out because they thought a popular, populist, charlatan, snake oil salesman would be able to save the country. You see, again, folks, here is the danger of looking for a messianic figure to become the linchpin of a new totalitarian movement. We have to ignore the Constitution to save the Constitution. Folks, that doesn't work. It has never worked. And the reason it doesn't work is because it is not based in the natural law tenets that underpin this republic of ours. You see, this is why we have been warning about this for 10 months. We have seen this danger coming to fruition. We see it now going on at an accelerated pace. Do not expect Trump to become a great conservative, because he doesn't even know what conservatism is. If you remember back to the second nationally televised gutless opposition party presidential candidate debate, he struggled in defining conservatism. That's because throughout this entire election cycle, he has been about ad hominem attacks. He has just been going after his fellow Republicans and saying that the system was rigged. You notice that that line has been dropped. Why isn't he saying it's rigged anymore? I thought Mr. Trump was wholeheartedly convinced that the nomination process was rigged. Well, it is rigged in his favor because of the way that the delegates were split, because of the attempts of the detente wing of the gutless opposition party to prevent a conservative movement from galvanizing, because of the rule changes they made in 2012 to try and have a front runner chosen within the first 3 to 4 states. No, that doesn't work. And it shows that he was lying then, he's lying now, and what in the hell makes you think he won't be lying in the future? The man is a pathological liar. That is all he knows. That is all he has ever done. That is all he has ever engaged in. He lied to the Antiquities Department in New York with respect to the Bonwit Teller building that had all of those beautiful Art Deco things that were landmarks, essentially. When he learned that it would cost him too much, he'd just tear them down. And so he got permission to demolish the building based on preserving those things, and he didn't preserve it. Well, he got the nomination to the gutless opposition party on the promise that he would be conservative. But he's not going to do that. He's going to do what he's always done. He's always going to just look out for himself and promote the interests that are his best interests, not the best interests of the country. And the more he tries to deny that, the more it is going to come back to bite us. And then we see that his own spokeswoman, Katrina Pearson, had defended Trump's record on women by saying his own wife endorsed him. Well, duh. Of course she's going to endorse him. He'd probably come after her if she didn't, knowing his reputation, knowing the way that he's done things in the past. Do you think that this honestly won't still play into that ridiculous narrative of the erroneous Republican war on women? Trump will fully, satisfy that because of who he is, because of what he does, because of the way he acts. You see, this is why a vulgarian like Trump is a terrible pick for the Republican Party. It shows that it will once again play out to the narrative of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, but more importantly, it's going to play out to Hillary Clinton's narrative. And the fact that there are so many voters who don't like him, and the fact that his negatives are just through the roof, it means that he cannot win. He is going to fail. And he's going to fail miserably. I know that Rush still wants to go out there and say, well, Trump's going to win in a landslide. Look at these new polls. Wrong. Wrong. Just absolutely wrong. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the Quaffberg that will sink the Trumpertanic, because he has such a long, sordid history of dirt. And we already know that Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon and owner of the Washington Post, has already instructed his reporters to begin digging up dirt on Trump. Of course, never mind the fact that this is a process that should have started all throughout the primary campaign season. No. They wanted to ensure that he would be the nominee so that the Republican Party would sail to defeat on the Trumpertanic once it strikes that Quaffberg. That is what we are left with. That is untenable. It's unacceptable. And then for people to say that it's un-American to not support Trump, go to hell. We're sick and tired of this. It's that sort of divisiveness that is going to lead us to defeat. How dare you? Seriously, to that Stinchfield jerk in Dallas, go to hell. First of all, I've never even heard of your radio show, and I know that this is a repeat from yesterday, but it needs to be repeated, because when you go and you make statements like that, you are betraying what it quintessentially means to be an American citizen. You are attacking the fundamental and inalienable right of the people to vote their conscience. How dare you, sir? How dare you? The United States of America is greater than all of that. But we've lost sight of that. We have been led astray by these charlatans, these hucksters, these con artists, these snake oil salesmen. But there will be a reckoning. November 8th will be a dark day, irrespective of what the outcome may be. Even if by some cruel twist of fate, Trump manages to survive the sinking of the Trumpertanic after striking that Quaffberg and rose to the White House, he will still be a Fabian socialist. He will still waffle on things, and the Republican Party will still implode. The alt-right does not adhere to the Constitution, and they call us conservatives. They make up these terms. They sling this proverbial mud in order to push their twisted agenda that is more in line with European thought than American thought. Well, folks, we fought our revolution to define ourselves separate and apart, uniquely and independent from Europe. Have we forgotten this? Why do we want to emulate Europe? Why do we want to emulate a society that has embraced Fabian socialism and is on the brink of collapse? That makes no sense to me. And that is a rejection of American exceptionalism. It is a rejection of the fundamental tenets that are contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. Well, that's not acceptable. We will not tolerate that. We will resist that, because we resist anything that goes against the Constitution and our fundamental and inalienable rights. That is the only way to ensure that our nation survives. That is the only way that we can ensure the continuing vitality, viability, and survival of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. There is no way we can walk away from that, because it is the quintessential part of who we are. It defines who we are. It does everything for us. And if we lose that, we lose our rights. And if we forfeit our rights, we lose everything. You see, folks, that is what the fight is about. That is what the fight has always been about. Going back to the inception of this country, the quintessential question is whether the federal government has the power to strip us of our rights. And of course, the answer to that question should be open and obvious to everyone. No, they do not. We are the ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. But liberty requires our proactive attention. It requires our proactive maintenance and safeguarding. Complacency has worked against us. Complacency has moved us into this untenable situation. And one of the worst forms of complacency is to buy into this erroneous doctrine of voting for the lesser of two evils. What has that gotten us, if not this sort of shameful condition that we find ourselves in right now as I speak into this microphone? That is exactly what it has gotten us. And it has not worked in our favor. It has not worked for our benefit, and we need to return to the Constitution. That is why it is so important for us all to foster this fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and our fundamental and inalienable rights. Because then we can say no. We can point out and spot these charlatans and hucksters from the get-go. You see, folks, we want to empower you. That has been our goal here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, since we began doing our shows back on September 11th of 2015. We will never abandon that mission. We will never stop advocating for this because we care about the United States and her people. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to send back the flight attendant for one last round of alcohol. You can rest assured she won't attack you. And as always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you might have either here on our YouTube page or our Google Plus page or our Facebook page. And on top of this, I invite you to follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle of @RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, our Blogspot page, which also includes audio blogs, and our Cafe Press account that has a bunch of trinkets and goodies, including drinking glasses, hats, watches, clocks, clothing, apparel of all sorts, even cell phone and iPad covers with our logo on it or the first class passenger logo on it. Go ahead and take a look at that, folks, and see if any of it catches your fancy and make a purchase. It goes to help make sure that we can continue to provide you with this indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment that we always do. As always, folks, thank you again. We will see you next time. Do take care.